So from the apocalypse, come to Bywater, which isn't actually an apocalypse. It's a nice part of Edinburgh. Little France in the east was a place no one built on because it was underneath a water table, but the French court used to camp there. That's why it's called Little France. But I'm in the NHS. I've been trained in the NHS. I'm a doctor in the NHS. I love the NHS. I'm passionate about the NHS, and I've been on Bywater now since 2004 or 5. And I'm just going to, the next 10 minutes, talk about a push that we're trying to do. But it's a collaborative push with lots of universities, lots of partners and code base, and also partners in the far land of San Francisco as well. So trying to cut and paste, Jamie. So I'm not going to go over this too long, but for me as a doctor, the top one scares me. Okay, if I'm giving you an example of drugs failing to make it through, as Jamie talked about, 2.5 billion to make an antibiotic. And for tuberculosis, which is an area of medicine that I practice in, that is the apocalypse. Resistant TB endangers the health of every human being if that happens with no new drugs. So just keep that in the back of your mind. We're not developing those drugs that help the global world. And as both the previous speakers have talked to, this exponential growth of the ageing and healthy population. So as we live longer, because we've made advances, come huge costs. So what do we want to do? It's not actually rocket science, but it might well be. So we want to stop, diagnose early, be smarter, but ultimately it's about improving our quality of life and not the quantity of life. So that's really the central mantra of, I think, innovation as it moves forward. And I've taken this slide, as Jamie knows, from one of his slides, but I love this slide because it talks about the US consumer market, about the time it takes for different sectors to become adopted. So you can look at the stove with these curves or other things that are gradually going up. But the key thing is, since 1993, when the internet came in, look at the vertical rate of adoption. This is a picture of the phones that I've owned, maybe not, but you can see the change that's happening rapidly. And for me, as a doctor, I started medical school in 1993, but technology, since I've been practicing, is completely revolutionizing daily practice. And you can see that happening. However, there's a problem. The distant past of trying to develop products was a bit like walking along a pier and falling off into the sea and hoping you'd be picked up. The recent past, which is actually the current challenge, is you're still jumping over massive bridges. It costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time, as just discussed around drugs. That has to speed up. And where do we want to go for the future of healthcare? We need to be fighter pilots. We want to go much, much faster and potentially be much more directed. So what if we brought people together, just as Catherine talked about? What if we brought together different disciplines, mixed them together and put them in the same place? What if we started to speak each other's languages? What if we fought disease and not each other? We spend a lot of time fighting each other, let's be clear. And what if we embrace global health priorities? And what if we fuse innovation within this structure we'll call the NHS? Well, the options, are clear. So the light bulb moment comes when you combine disciplines, diversity and technologies together, mathematics, engineering, biology, physics, data science and chemistry, and then you have these great moments where things happen, seeds become trees. And that's what Bywater feels to me, as I've been there, as I've watched it grow. It's a place that's organically growing, and that's an old picture. But it shows a multitude of buildings, but the key is there's actually a hospital site which is enlarging at scale with all of the specialties next to an innovation zone. And I'm fortunate to work in this building, which I'm very proud of, called the Queen's Medical Research Institute, because that really has allowed things to happen. It's called number 1 in the bottom corner there. It's not number 9, which is at the top. But what we've been trying to do, the QMRI, is a joined-up vision where we've been trying to bring together the disciplines, think about actually making drugs and putting them together and taking them back into patients to try and speed up that loop. How do we go faster in that loop? Because we can do it. We're all on one site. And so the idea is it's human capital. It's from the bottom up. And it's from bedside to the bench and back again as fast as possible. But most importantly, it's bottom-up innovation. It's integrating with the NHS and thinking about the amazing capacity we have as individuals on that site to do this. And I think it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Well, we need it for the UK now, given what's happening. But we have excellence, integration, and most importantly, we have team science that's emerging. And that's the key push that needs to happen for innovation. I'm not going to go this too long, but Jamie's talked about this. My figures are 1 billion off compared to yours, Jamie, but 1.5 billion to make a drug. No wonder there aren't any antibiotics. Start off at 5,000, 10,000 compounds to one drug that comes out at the end. And the biggest challenge we have as developing this pathway is that this is a slide about why projects terminate. The key thing to remember is that from AstraZeneca, 88% of drugs failed because they didn't actually work when they got through. So everyone passes this fast pathway, oh, it's working in the cell, it's working in the animal, but we're not good enough at actually developing technologies or drugs that actually work in patients, and that needs to be improved. And from our perspective, this is how a drug is taken forward. You have a target in a dish, goes into animals, go through phase 4 trials. That whole thing needs to be disrupted. And on the BioQuarter, the potential is to think about these things now with new technologies, make this process completely more efficient. And so what do patients need? How do we help the patients we look after on a daily basis? And, when I started as a doctor, it's about looking after patients, following org charts, following Oxford handbooks, what you do because somebody told you that's what you did 10 years ago, and you keep doing it and you make sure you don't make a mistake. If you make a mistake, you get sued, you get knocked off the register. That's what you worry about. But really, what do we need to do? We have to be entrepreneurs as clinicians and scientists. We have to commercialize, we have to make products. We have to build new enterprises, such as with Codebase and others, and we have to form these industrial partnerships. Otherwise, we can't take these products forward. And what we've been trying to do in the BioQuarter is something we call HTAF, which is the Healthcare Technology Accelerator Facility, is try and understand the challenges, think about this full care pathway, and begin to conceive, translate, and soon commercialize. And the main thing is about knowing which way to run. It's very easy to go the wrong way quite fast, and just helping people with domain expertise do that. And a nutcracker company, you don't really need the hammer to crack the nut. Just you can innovate in terms of the pathway, you can innovate in terms of the intervention, but think very carefully about how we do this from start to end. And what we're trying to do is bring together clinicians or front healthcare providers with areas of outstanding clinical need that have been intractable, put them into teams and start doing things that we would not normally do right at the beginning, even before we think of a technology. Think about the opportunity, think about where we're going to go first, way ahead, and then try and mentor them as they move forward. And the idea is on the BioQuarter site, you have all of this. You have lab space, you have clinicians, you have project managers, you've got quality management systems, all in Edinburgh on that site. And there's an incredible opportunity to take this forward. And the pathway is painful. The pathway going from left to right has been painful. So that's a picture of probably many of us on the right-hand side trying to take something forward. Start off very sad, bang your head, bang your head, bang your head, do something, and then joy. But that can take 10, 15 years. We can speed that up in this part of Edinburgh. We can do that faster. And so there is now a technology innovation hub. There's the capability to bring disciplines together to make things and test them. And really the idea now, if we think about some projects we're doing, we start off with interactions, we try and match make, we do some sense checking, then we take them through panels, we try and curate these projects forward. And excitingly, we think about what we need to take them into market right at the beginning. So we make sure we scope the opportunity as soon as possible. And we think about both the regulatory pathways, the outputs, and bring together as big a team as possible to do that. And it's exciting because these current innovations of products are now in 7, 8 different areas. They're doing very diverse things. Some of them are doing the waggle dance. They're way off there. They're clinicians that I've got an idea. We've put an engineer and physical science with them going, really? and interestingly, some of them are actually pretty cool. But they're not things that would normally be funded if you didn't put people together. That's the key thing. But the most important bit is culturally imprinting. And in terms of where we are in Edinburgh, we have the ability to think about entrepreneurship, think about products, networks. And the fourth one's the most important thing, confidence and comfort zone. We need to start generating the confidence to be creative, to innovate, to have a go. Doesn't matter if it fails, do it again. And I had a learning experience just coming to Codebase. You should all visit Codebase once you get through the front door. And so, but the ability to be allowed to fail, to learn, to come back again, to do it again and again. What we don't want are environments where if you fail, you'll never try anything again. You've got to have that confidence and be in an environment. That's where I think, again, Bi-Quarter gives you that potentially. So, again, cheesy, my definition of team, together everyone achieves more. And I say this a lot, we should stop fighting each other, we should fight disease. That is the biggest intractable challenge that we have. So finally, just a big thank you, but really the push for healthcare technology in Edinburgh unites these with Codebase, California Life Science Institute, and some of our other partners and universities that want to take this forward on that site. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dhaliwal. Many thanks. And to our 2 other guest speakers tonight, big round of applause. Thank you. Right. So if I'd like to take a seat, we'll take some questions. We've got 2 roving mics, and if I could just ask, before you ask your questions, make sure the mic's with you so that we can all hear your questions clearly. And don't worry if you don't get a chance to ask some questions, because the 3 speakers tonight have very kindly offered some time afterwards to join us for a drink, and if you've got any questions there too. So, any questions? Who's going to be first? Lady at the front there.
This is a question for Jamie. You talked about the changes that the NHS need to consider adopting. Have you got an impression as to whether they will embrace these changes as a whole?
So I think Kev talked about a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity a few years ago. So what we used to say was that for any Edinburgh-based healthcare company, that they should go to America first, because it was so much easier to get in there and then 3 or 4 years later eventually come back to the NHS. Which was always depressing, because you thought this cool stuff was being invented in Edinburgh and patients couldn't get access to it for donkey's years, because it was a nightmare. It was just a complete nightmare. I think with the undeniable facts that NHS boards have in terms of those costs, that pushes people to be more creative. When that managed decline just becomes untenable. And now the reality is, in the past year and a half, we've had some properly amazing conversations with NHS boards, around, and NHS Lothian locally. Don't get me wrong, we've done this with every weird company known to humanity, and it's always painful dealing with big organisations. But I think there's a moment of understanding that they know it. Things just have to change. Okay. Any other next question? Gentleman at the right-hand side there.
Thank you all 3 for very thought-provoking talks. My question is for Jamie in particular. You said that startups are unable to sell, and although, provided you've got a market-ready product or service, investment is important. But in my experience, sales is the lifeblood of any startup. I was just wondering what made you say that? And
because I've done it with over 1,000 startups and nearly shot myself. And from the geeks come in the door that think they can do low touch, no touch sales and automate it and so on, and then understanding that they need to build a sales function within that. But the harder piece is moving from getting a startup to understand what it means to actually sell stuff is one thing, but the bigger problem is, and this is especially for enterprise class software, or B2B, or whatever you would want to call that, the fundamental problem is that they'll all get paid proof of concepts from big organizations, but they'll never get procured because they're too risky, because they don't have 3 years of accounts and all that stuff. So yes, every big organization wants to hang out with startups, and they get nice photographs of young companies and laptops, and hey, it's all great. But the truth is, they almost never get really properly procured, because they never make it. If you imagine the corporate like the Death Star, the startup only gets in like that far. And so with some notable examples, that was the real pain. The real pain was trying to make those relationships happen, and the realization that the transformation was not just trying to make those startups better at understanding sales functions, but it was understanding that we had to change the internal workings of the big company they were trying to sell to. So that was a bit of a long answer.
Okay. Next question. Anyone? Gentleman over there.
Often disciplines are compartmentalized. How do you train people at the interface of these disciplines in mathematics, the physical sciences, to solve big problems in healthcare?
Oh, yep. So I suppose it's a great question, important question. So I think we're learning that process, but one of the things is to have a common goal and to understand the challenge and imbibe them with that vision that we're all working towards a common deliverable goal, as opposed to trying to remain in silos and individual. And I think that's an ongoing challenge that we have within the scientific community around historical silos that exist around disciplines. Within the UK funding structure, I think that's completely been ripped apart at the moment. So we're in a really exciting time where the serious UK funders are joining them together. The big charitable organisations are realising that team science is the way forward. And we've learned this from all different walks of life, that unless you work in these interdisciplinary teams, you'll go very slowly and faster together. But I completely agree, there are certain individuals that will never want to do that, or groupings. And it's like, come to the dance, please come and enjoy it with us. If you don't want to, then there's a church, there's an area you can go and play, but don't come to the playfield. But we'd encourage everyone to come. But I think it's changing. I think, right, Ian, it is changing.
Okay. Any other questions from this side of the room? Gentleman in the middle there, John.
Thank you. What I was going to ask was, do you think there is a option whereby the startups and things could be underwritten? You were mentioning there the fact that they have to have audits going back X number of years. And you were mentioning the fact that you're looking to get other people in the organisation to help open it out. And you were mentioning the fact that you want to get it going quicker in the system. So if you change the system whereby you had integrators perhaps who would work with these different silos, which is what they appear to be sometimes, to help them talk to one another, and also, as I say, look at it and have the expertise to be able to look at it and underwrite it,
So to tease that apart, so one version of underwriting is just state aid, and that's not going to happen. But the underwriting, exactly. But the underwriting you're talking about is internal, and so exactly. So the reality is, they're the wrong people. They can't judge it. They can't tell if it's any good or not. So it's faster horse syndrome. We call it dragging your ex around, but that's a talk for another day that I have a nice PowerPoint on. So reality is that that's just really, really painful. You always have to have internal champions. You have to find someone that loves your thing, who can say to the boss, buy this, I know they're weirdos, but just give them a chance. And the truth is that human thing is exactly what does happen in not necessarily a structured way. Companies have tried to structure it in terms of open innovation champions and innovation managers and so on. The problem is that they could still be fired if they make a bad decision, and that remains problematic for them. So they're always tempted to go for something which is, a little bit innovative, but not too much.
You're talking about a sort of an advocate.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? The lady in the centre there.
This is a question on data integration. How close are we in Scotland to having a patient-integrated data computerised system? Because I've not been in the industry for a few years, but when I was, we were still struggling to try and make that happen.
I don't think I could say either. I think it's something that has been talked about for a long time. There's quite a lot of different things going on to try and push it forward, and it will happen eventually. I just can't. I wouldn't like to guess when. I would say that there is, there's people have tried things and they failed, like the startup thing. People have thought it would be easy. Oh yeah, we'll just do that, no problem. And they've tried and it didn't work. And then someone else has tried and someone else has tried, and eventually one of us will get through, like one of them will succeed. And I think there has been learning along the way, and so we're getting closer. But I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to say when.
But we also have to reflect on how good Scotland is in some of that aspect. So there's a unique identifier that we all have as patients here. We go from birth, cradle to death with that unique identifier. So I can look up in my clinic an X-ray or a CT for someone that was done in Aberdeen that was done a month or two ago. I can look up some basic now GP data around what drugs are on when they say, I don't know what medicines I'm on, doctor. That doesn't happen in England. So when I used to work in certain parts of East London, I couldn't communicate with a hospital that was 3 miles away. So I think there's a positive side. We are in a really powerful position because that's established, but now it's to reap the dividends of that, to make it much more integrated. But it is a good place for linked up data.
Okay. Any other questions? One question here. John? It's just Morag down there.
I'm Morag from the EICC. I've sneaked in a question at the end. The Bioquarter is an amazing area where all the businesses are together. Is there anywhere like that you know of similar, or are we unique in that respect? Because it just seems great to have this campus that has everything together.
So it's not alone in the world or even in the UK in terms of its aspirations to be a biopark next to a hospital at all. So there are precedents set in North America of these examples. But in terms of a UK setting, to my knowledge, there's nowhere with this amount of opportunity and flat land and an NHS system that's growing, with all the hospitals coalescing. So if you go to London areas, everything's going vertical, there's nowhere to move. The price of real estate in the south of England's through the roof. But if you go to the Bioquarter, and it's quite leafy, it's getting leafier, there's water functions, there's nice paths being made. So I think every time I go there and I drive in and walk, I think, wow, this could and will be amazing. So I think it is like no other place. At the moment, it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to leverage what we have there.
Wonderful. That's a good reason to ring a conference.
Yeah. Well done, Morag. And as compere, I'm going to abuse my position here and ask a question to all three of you, just very briefly. In Scotland, what does success look like within the NHS to you?
So I mean, ultimately, we have an expanding customer base for the NHS, and without doubt, the success is like most, public structures. It's increased efficiency and quality of delivery of care. It shouldn't be measured personally in amount of life. It's quality of life and great service, and ultimately, with 5 million people and actually a really great, well-funded NHS Scotland, we're lucky we're above that cut-off, but much more efficient and better quality of delivery, personally.
I guess from the data and innovation angle that I have, I think success is when we start to see that acceleration in how we can use the data, and once we tweak it and just are able to get it right, it's just going to take off the innovation that we can do. So it's quite exciting that I think a lot of people feel like they're banging their head against a brick wall, trying to do doing great things, but it is really hard. And I think once we just sort out the systems, there's tweaks to how we do things, really, in terms of and it's it seems boring unless you're someone like me who loves it, but changing the governance structures and changing how exactly we pull data together and things. They're not groundbreaking things, but once we get them right, things are going to accelerate. So.
Okay, thank you.
If we can empower doctors and healthcare professionals to take their ideas and to help them turn those ideas into reality, into products and devices and services, if we can do that in a way while teaching the NHS and it's from across the management levels, how to deal with the new. If we can do that in a small country, we can create a form of healthcare that will be the envy of the planet at the same time as doing that in an affordable way. So that would be lovely.
Good. How long is that going to take?
You know what? I reckon a decade.
A decade. Wow. Gosh. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Dr. Stables, Dr. Coleman, and Professor Dhaliwal. So thanks again, speakers, and thanks very much to you too for coming along this evening. And of course, our wonderful panel here will be giving up, and thanking them for giving up their free time tonight. But EICC Live returns on the Monday, the 2nd of December, with a library of mistakes, when our guest speaker, Ray Perman, discusses the history of finance in connection with human decision-making under uncertainty. Pretty topical. So please do check the website for details. And you're all welcome to join us for a drink outside. So thank you very much.